It's another episode of Film Streak, and this is Rob, but also with me today is...
Pedro Rivas with the Houston Latino Film Festival.
Tell us a little bit about what's coming up with the festival.
So we have Handling the Muertos coming up November 2nd and November 3rd. On November 2nd, which is the actual Dia de los Muertos, we're going to show films from around the world. We're going to show a block of short films and also a feature film from El Salvador called Altares, a beautiful film, very tragic. And then on Sunday, we will have another collection of short films, and some of the filmmakers will be in attendance for Q&A. And then our closing night feature film called Teques Chainsaw Massacre. And it's about some filmmakers making a horror film, but they happen to be all hunted by...
Is it kind of a spin on the horror classic?
It feels more like a Friday the 13th type film.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So that's a couple of days coming up here pretty soon.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I just want to give you a couple minutes to talk about that because it's always cool to see what you guys do with the festival and, the different kinds of events and collaborations you guys have. So that's something to check out for sure. I'll try and make it, of course.
Yeah, it'll be at 14 Pews again, now called Aurora Chapel. And in the backyard, we will have some tamales, popcorn, pan de muerto, and some sponsored beverages.
Okay.
Yeah, as well as poetry reading, and then an additional secret screening, but we're going to announce that soon.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So where else can they maybe find out like details or get
find
tickets?
this on HoustonLatinoFilmFestival.org. Also on our Facebook and Instagram pages, where we will have more information about the event. You can look up the synopsis about the films and then get tickets. It's going to be either tickets per screening or tickets for the whole day.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. And of course, anything to do with the festival, those are the same places to go, right?
Yep.
For next year's big festival or any other events or things that you have
Any
going
collaborations that we have coming up, which we also do November 10th, I believe, with the Museum of Fine Arts. So they're doing their fall festival, Myths and Legends. It's going to be on a Sunday, November 10th. And we have contributed a collection of short films somewhat associated with Myths and Legends. That lineup should be coming out soon as well.
Awesome. So that's
our second year doing that with them.
Yeah. I went last year. It was pretty
Okay.
cool. So that's here, Museum of Fine Arts of Houston. You're in the Houston area. I say if you're in anywhere and you're hearing this, come check it out.
Yeah.
I think it'll be fun. So, all right. So we got a little bit of business out of the way. I'm glad you have some new things going on, and we talk about that. But we are here to talk about some zombie films.
Yep.
We talked, what was it, a couple months ago at some point about, hey, let's do another episode. And right around that time, I was watching a couple of these films, and then I found a documentary, and then our list kind of grew for this.
Yeah.
But the first two films that I had in mind already when we started talking about it was the original Day of the Dead and then the remake of it. And I've done this thing in a few episodes over the couple of years I've been doing this, where I look at the original film and then I look at a remake and just kind of try to understand, like, why did they remake this film? Maybe the filmmakers thought it needed to be done better. Maybe it was a little bit of a cash grab, right?
Yeah.
So this was one that I had never seen, or I might have seen the original Day of the Dead from 1985, but I did not remember it at all.
Yeah, I'd never seen it.
And I certainly had never seen the remake of it.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there was a remake of it. But, the other thing is there's a documentary that I saw called Birth of the Living Dead. And that was one that got me more interested in this just in general because, one, it's about the making of Night of the Living Dead from George A. Romero.
Yeah.
But also it goes into like the, not just the creative process, the actual filming and production of it, but the effect that it had. Just that film alone and kind of jump-starting this genre, right?
Created the modern day zombie.
And it's something that I guess I just never connected the dots. Like, oh yeah, this one film really did it.
Yeah.
I mean, there were films earlier on, maybe like in the 40s or something like that, with zombies or zombie in the title,
Yeah.
but not like this kind of creature, I guess.
Yeah.
They were more like mystical or some sort of other exotic kind of beings.
Yeah.
And here it's just regular people just coming back from the dead. And so in that context, like it made me rethink how I look at zombie movies just in general. I mean, so we could talk about Day of the Dead. I kind of want to talk about the documentary first, though,
Okay.
and kind of your thoughts on it.
I'm glad they just stayed focused on Night of the Living Dead. I thought they were going to talk about the whole thing. They just kind of briefly talk about like the success, the effect they had afterwards, but the focus of trying to get it made, how he got like, they had no funds, and getting something like sound mixing done, they had to play a game of chess just to, if you win, you can get the sound mixing for free.
Even like the casting, like people who are behind the scenes are on camera.
They were wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the makeup artist was also the producer, was also an actor in the film. So I thought that was cool. It very much had that indie film kind of quality to it. And the first time, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the documentary, but the first time I actually saw Night of the Living Dead, I saw it on VHS a long time ago. And so it's interesting hearing everybody's reactions in the documentary or talking about the first time they saw it, because I had that same feeling. Never really cared much for zombie movies until I had seen Night of the Living Dead, the original. And it's beautiful. The shots, iconic. And I remember even when I saw it, I was like, wait, is that a black guy as the main character? And it's not really made a big deal of. And they touch on that in the documentary. And you just kind of like, you accept it. You're like, you know what? Yeah, you're right. This is just a scary movie. I mean, whether they're trying to make some kind of social commentary on it or not, they kind of say they are, but that they also say they weren't. They were just trying to create a scary movie.
Yeah, they didn't want to necessarily point it out.
Yeah.
But they gave him the job because he seemed the most fitting for the role.
Yeah.
It wasn't a specific thing of casting someone who's black in the lead, because they talk about in the documentary, it's like, this probably wouldn't have gone well if they would have thought it through. Like they would have probably made a different decision. So the idea is then that it puts the film really ahead of its time.
Yes.
And maybe not even on purpose, you know. The thing I took away from it was that kind of thing of like being an independent film, like truly independent, where it was almost like they weren't worried about breaking the rules because they kind of maybe didn't even know the rules.
Yeah.
Right. And so they were just making it up and finding what made sense for the film and the story they were trying to tell. And you know, I have a little bit of experience doing like some short films and stuff, and you've been a part of that, and I'm sure you've had your own perspective on it. And it's funny to see that on that level, like in the late 60s, they were making this film.
Yeah.
Who would have maybe thought it would have the impact it had, of course, but the fact that it has, this documentary, I think, really kind of shed some light on, it doesn't really matter how much money you have. It doesn't even matter if you have the right resources or the right kind of cast or whatever. It's like, if you've just got the will and you've got a good idea, you can really do something special.
And the interviews they did with George Romero, he's very humble, you know, and saying like, I didn't make this movie. He goes, you made this movie. You made this movie. He's just kind of like saying like, it took a whole team, you know, to create this, to kind of come up with ideas. You know, they were having issues, I think, getting to the house because of some body of water. And he said one of the investors built a bridge.
Right.
He's like, which was strong enough to just drive over with your car. I was like, wow, yeah, that's what it took.
Yeah.
You know, so it has, that grassroots feeling of, you know, they didn't even have the script fully finished yet, but they were still working on other areas of the filmmaking process. And it was cool kind of seeing that.
Yeah, the thing that really kind of stuck out is just how lasting it has been. Now, you know, over the years, different filmmakers have come along and have kind of put different spins on the undead, the zombies, the conventions of it. and we can probably talk about some of that in a minute, but this really did hold for a long time. Like this idea, like these specific kinds of zombies. This is what we saw in horror films for a pretty good while, you know. I mean, I think the one that probably really broke the mold or tried to reinvent it was either 28 Days Later or maybe the remake of Dawn of the Dead, you know, where it's like, oh, these zombies are angry or they're fast or whatever.
Yeah, 28 Days Later made it where you have to be maybe in a little bit of shape to get away from these guys.
Yeah. and of course, it kind of spun its own way because they weren't necessarily undead. It was like a virus or some kind of thing. So it's kind of working in a different, you know, respect. But I think people would still identify it as a zombie movie, right? And, you know, the idea that The Walking Dead comes along, 2010, something like that? And kind of takes it to a whole different level because it's like, this is something you probably wouldn't have seen outside of a movie theater, you know, or on a movie screen.
Yeah.
And now it's on television every week. Like the gore of it.
The last 10, 15 years now.
Yeah.
They got spinoffs now.
Yeah. It's like its own universe in a way. So, you know, it's something that you can trace all of that back to the original Night of the Living Dead.
Yep.
And this documentary, Birth of the Living Dead, I think it digs pretty deep and it kind of gives a lot of behind the scenes, a lot of access. I mean, not only to the people who made the film, but other filmmakers and other people who kind of saw it, you know, saw its success and saw its effects.
Yeah.
But the funny thing I did take away from this was the teacher who showed his students the film.
That tripped me out.
It did, right?
Yes.
And
I was like, I hope he got parents to sign off on this.
Yeah, there must have been a permission slip in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But it is something that you could look back now and think, well, that film isn't that. It's graphic, but because it's black and white, and
it's a bleak film, though. Like
that's the thing.
When
right?
you think about some of the major deaths that happen in it, a daughter eating her father, a daughter killing her mother, a sister being killed by her zombie brother. Yeah, these are all familial murders by, you know, loved ones. And then, of course, without ruining the ending, but just the bleak ending. It's an all-around bleak film.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah, it's disturbing.
All that work.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's Birth of the Living Dead. And so before we kind of jump into these other films, you were just telling me, like, you did go back and watch Night of the Living Dead. Or...
Yes, I watched Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
The originals.
The originals, yeah.
Okay. What's interesting to me is, as we get into the next two, is all of these films, well, let's put it this way. Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and the one we're going to talk about here in a minute, Day of the Dead, they've all been remade. Mm-hmm. And part of me wonders why. And that's always what I like to kind of think about or explore, I guess, here.
Yeah.
But all of those remakes, I think Dawn of the Dead, that remake really kind of did change some things. And I think it, of course, made Zack Snyder into a name.
I actually like the remake of Dawn of the Dead.
No, I like it because it's like, this does feel like a true, like we're reinventing this.
Yes.
Versus we're kind of just doing the same thing over again.
Yeah, because the original Dawn of the Dead, it kind of felt spread out. Mm-hmm. There was like different sections to it. I think it was over 2 hours. Yeah. And so the remake is more focused, you know, and they kind of stick with the narrative of and the cast of characters up until, you know, the end. I think Zack Snyder did a good job with his remake.
Oh yeah, I do too. I mean, even some of his style of filmmaking, you know, I think it just adds a different intensity to it. I mean, that opening scene, I don't want to get too far off, but the opening scene of that remake with the girl in the house, and then you kind of zooming out with the woman that plays the main character, and she's like driving through the neighborhood trying to get away, and you're seeing everything just going crazy.
Yes, yeah.
And then out onto the highway, and then you see the whole city is falling apart.
You're right. That's a crazy beginning.
Yeah.
I'm remembering it right now because all I remember right now, because I haven't seen it in a while, is the mall.
Yeah.
But you're right. It starts with her husband attacking her, right?
Well, it's the little girl.
Or is that what it is? Okay.
Yeah.
But she's driving through the neighborhood. The neighborhood's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So like that kind of thing, because I feel like that kicked off other things in filmmakers and films that came afterwards. Because I could feel like they kind of played with that in Zombieland. You know, like the idea of like going through a neighborhood and seeing all the weird things that are happening and the craziness of it all.
I see that in World War Z, where they're stuck in traffic.
Right.
And then things are getting wild, turns around, and it's just worse.
Yeah. So, that's where, I feel like this genre, it's not maybe like other, I don't know, creatures or monsters or these kinds of characters, because they are kind of nameless and faceless. Yeah. So it's always being iterated on. Like it's kind of being tweaked and modified and built upon into new films as they keep coming. So anyway, let's get to Day of the Dead here.
All right.
This is a film I just cannot remember seeing this film at any point when it came out. But I was interested because this is another George A. Romero film. This is the third in his, I guess, the Living Dead franchise.
Right.
And, the idea of it, I feel like it could be seen as like a sequel to the other two films, but just a different approach to the way it's told and even the types of characters. Like, I just feel like this one feels like of a different era. I mean, it is, but...
I feel like he's creating different stories each time. So it reminds me of the book World War Z, which is nothing like the film.
Right.
In the book, you get these vignettes of things that are happening to people all around the world and how they're affected by the zombie apocalypse. So I feel like Romero, he's not really continuing. He's like, let's look at this part of the world now where this thing is happening. And we now will tell their story during the zombie apocalypse. That's my take on it after watching 3 of them.
I didn't even connect that, but yeah.
That's what it feels, because there's no main character that's continuing.
Right. That is one thing that did kind of frustrate me. It kind of just keep me interested in the World War Z film. Because I love the book. And the idea that it is kind of hopping all over the place.
Yeah.
And no two stories are really alike. And no characters overlap. I thought that was an interesting approach to telling that, because it does give you a scope.
Yeah.
And I guess I just never connected it to these films. I really kind of thought, well, they're sequels, but only in name.
Yeah.
And even, are these zombies the same kinds of zombies as the previous film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and I see that. I see them only as sequels in the passage of time. And because you can tell, like, technology is getting a little better,
right,
or styles are changing as the films progress. But I don't see them being sequels into stories.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to have seen any of the previous films, the 2 previous films, to enjoy or understand Day of the Dead.
So how did that work out for you? Because you did do that.
I did do that, and realized there was no connection. I thought my first one is still my favorite. But I did appreciate the story that they were trying to tell it kind of had a Lord of the Flies quality. And like, you stick all these people in a room with guns, with titles, and then suddenly, who is the real leader? Because you see the army guys, they start like, we don't really care, pushing the doctors around. The doctors don't really take them seriously. When the one main army guy is trying to get everyone to listen to him, he's just yelling, he's being outlandish, to the point where he tells one of his soldiers, shoot her for not sitting down. And so that's where I'm like, oh, this is not just a zombie movie. This is a play on power, a play on what are we going to do when the electricity goes out? Yeah. Who's going to have authority, or who's going to, I guess, make themselves the authority? Yeah. Oh, you don't want to listen? Now I'm going to shoot you. Like, oh, okay. So diplomacy is gone now. You know?
That's where, this is a film that's almost 40 years old at this point. And those characterizations, I think that's where the film kind of shows some of its age. I think the thing is, to me, it didn't seem very nuanced. Like they seem a little kind of two-dimensional. Like you kind of expect, oh, this is clearly the jerk of the bunch.
Yeah, there's no arc with anybody.
But really, all of these films are that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even the very first one, it's like these people in this house, and then the second one is people in a mall. They're kind of all in this pressure cooker kind of situation.
Yeah.
And whether it's the struggle for power or for, dominance or whatever it is. In this case, it's like, well, you're dealing with people who are in the military, so how do you really combat that,
Yeah, and you see the scientists viewing the military as brutes. Then it comes down to whoever has the gun is the one who gets to speak.
Right.
But no, yeah, you're right. There's no true character arcs. Whoever comes in as the jock, the bully, the athlete, the coward. There was that one guy who was just constantly scared, and that's how he remained the whole film. He was actually kind of annoying.
Yeah. I got to say, like, this film, it doesn't really hold up to me. I think thematically it's doing the work that it needs to do to kind of explore this idea, the people in a situation. But I think otherwise, I feel like some of the characters and even just some of the dialogue, it feels very kind of 80s,
Yeah, so the themes and the social commentary that we get to talk about now about it, interesting. Would I watch it again? No.
Yeah.
I was bored sometimes because I guess, as you said, like whoever, the characters were two-dimensional, so I knew what role they were going to play up until the end of the film without ever changing.
Right. And I think there's part of me that attributes that to this whole thing of this genre is constantly evolving to the point where we've got something like The Walking Dead where we can explore these characters every week for years and see the arcs and see the turns. Somebody who might have turned out to be a bad guy becomes a good guy or vice versa. And in a film that is kind of early in this genre, I think, there probably wasn't the thought to do that or to do it very much, So to me, this is probably, if we're looking at the first three films, and there are more films in this series. After the Day of the Dead, there's Land of the Dead, there's Survival of the Dead, and there's Diary of the Dead. These are the ones that I know of. There may be some others, but
I haven't seen those yet.
I saw Land of the Dead a long time ago. It's kind of even bigger scale. It's like an entire city.
Yeah.
Where it's like a city kind of under siege and they're trying to maintain it while there's zombies all around. And it's the same thing. It's the struggle for power and for, who's going to be able to do what and who's got the right idea to get away from the zombies or whatever.
Yeah.
And Diary of the Dead is one that I just saw recently. I don't want to go into it too much, but it's kind of a rolling version of these films. Okay. You've got a crew making an independent film, and it's like a found footage type of format. So you're seeing the cameras shooting each other, right? So that's the only way you're getting the footage that we're seeing. And meanwhile, they're in like a Winnebago, and they're like driving across the country to get away from all this. So it's kind of like a rolling.
Maybe I have seen that. It sounds kind of familiar.
But
I definitely need to rewatch them.
It's got an interesting idea, but again, it's taking this thing on the road, this situation. So, there are several in this series, and I feel like, well, we kind of keep treading over the same ground in a way. So that's why I was curious to look at the remake of Day of the Dead, because I wanted to see, does it do anything different? Being that some time had passed, because I think we're looking at 20 years between the two films. Yeah. From 85 to 2008. Yeah. So it's more than 20 years. And I kind of thought, oh, well, there will be something different here. But what was your take on it? Or Did this strike you in any particular way?
I hated it.
Okay, thank you.
I hated it, and I can't believe you made me watch this. I was a little upset with you while I was watching this movie, then I let it go. This movie, oh my God, it made me appreciate the original.
Yeah. Okay.
And and the thing is, when I watched the original, I was kind of bored,
Sure.
at times.
Sure.
Because
The pace of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And we knew where it was going to go. The remake, if that's even what it is, because it takes so many liberties.
That's a good
All
point.
they really did was steal the title. And
Yes.
then there's barely a scientist in this. Well, yeah.
So that was my first bone to pick with this thing. And this is one where it does kind of draw the cynical side of me out. It was like, why did they remake this film? And if they were going to remake it, why did they make it entirely different? It really doesn't have the same plot. I don't even think it really has the same set of characters. I mean, you do have a female lead.
Yeah.
And you do have the military involved. But that's kind of it.
They're just stuck in a town.
Yeah.
And, there's a house, there's a studio, a radio studio.
Yeah.
But there's not really a lot of similarities.
And this is one that I just feel like this was it's kind of a cash grab in a way. I mean, you've got a few recognizable people in the cast. Some of these films throughout the years, I don't recognize any of these people in these films. They're very independent.
You barely have Ving Rhames in it.
Right.
You have Mina Suvari, which she just probably looked way better compared to everybody else. I'd never seen a Nick Cannon film before. He was so bad. It's terrible. Did they really give him these lines? And he was like, nah, let me rewrite this. And then the zombies. The zombies. I don't know if you noticed, there was a zombie crawling on the ceiling. Did you see that?
Yeah.
I almost threw my cup of coffee on the floor, man. I was like, wait, hold on. I rewound it. And I thought, did I just see what I saw?
Yeah.
And it was fast.
Right.
Never happens again.
Well, this is a film that I feel like it was trying to borrow some of that energy of let's do something different with the zombies. And
you can't do it one time.
I know, right? It's they can't all do that?
They go back to gravity,
Yeah.
not defying it.
So, because this, if you look at it in context or chronologically, this does come after, films like 28 Days Later. And it feels really either derivative or just badly done.
Yeah, man. It's not good.
So,
I recommend it to nobody.
So here's one that I think, did they remake this for good reason? I kind of don't feel like they did. And with that, I think it shows. It's not even they were looking to cash in on something, but they actually ended up making a good film. This, I feel like it just didn't work either.
And I think that's reflective on how it got distributed. I don't even think it went to theaters. I believe, from what I read, it went straight to video.
Okay. Yeah.
At the time, you still have video stores, so it was just going straight to your local video chain.
That's right.
So that tells you right there.
But hey, look, that's part of the thing with this.
I
sometimes we hit a dud or two. So aside from these two films, the other two that we both kind of threw in a title that I think you had seen, Handling the Undead.
Yes.
Previously, right?
Yeah.
Or just recently. And one that I had that I thought might be interesting, it seemed like a very different kind of twist on everything, is One Cut of the Dead. And so, tell me about Handling the Undead, maybe how you discovered it and your thoughts on it.
So I heard about it because it had gone to Sundance.
Okay.
And then I finally saw it. The main actress, I forget her name right now, but she's played in some American films and television, as well as Norwegian. Handling the Undead is a Norwegian film. Mm-hmm. And watching it, I saw it a few months ago, and like I was telling you earlier, I couldn't remember why. I still need to rewatch it, but I couldn't remember why I couldn't remember certain things about the film.
Okay.
And so I had to go back and listen to some of the reviews, and then my memory started coming back to me about what it's about, because it's such a slow burn of a film. Yeah. And it seems to focus more on kind of grief and how grief affects us. And so much so that if a loved one were to return, your grief affects you in that you don't recognize that to not be normal, you know? And so, yeah, it's hard to even call them zombies because they don't behave like zombies at first.
Right.
Because they're just kind of catatonic. They're just lying around, sitting around.
I think that was something that, I know you told me about it, but I didn't really look into it or I just took it on your word of like, okay, Pedro liked it, so I'm going to watch it.
So I did like it. There's sometimes you watch a film, I remember the feeling I have of it, but I can't remember everything. But because I watch so many movies too.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. And so, but my take on it was about a third of the way into it, I wasn't feeling it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be getting out of this. But there's a point in the movie, and actually there are several moments, like scenes that happen, where I was like, oh, wait, I get it now. Because it is that. And that's exactly what I drew on or what I spotted is it's not a horror movie. It's not a thriller. It's not high action or intense in any way. It is more about that effect, that grief, that sort of almost like survivor's guilt in a way of being the ones that either you have to care for someone who you've lost or you don't want to even let them go, you know? And that's why I kind of took the title. It was like, oh, of course, the title is not about, because handling the undead, I'm like, oh, this is how we handle them.
Yeah.
Like, no. It's about how you hold them, how you either like hold on to them or how you just, literally care for them.
Yeah.
Because that is some of this film. I mean, there are shots in the film, there are scenes, I guess, where you could almost take out that that's a zombie that we're watching, like a quote unquote zombie. And it's just a person who is dying or has just died. And so it plays like that. I mean, the characters in the film, they play like people who are struggling and dealing with grief.
Yeah. And
so that's where, man, I mean, I didn't expect it. I really was kind of like backing away from it. Just because it is a very slow burn and it doesn't explain a lot of what's happening. Like it doesn't tell you like how this happened. Like, are these the zombies we know? How is this in Norway? You know what I mean?
Is this kind of like radiation? Is this something mystical?
Yeah.
And like I told you, it's like a prologue to the beginning of a story, but we're like at the tip of that story, and then that's where it ends.
That's the thing that bothers me with like genre films, especially in like zombies or vampires or something, where it's like people don't know what this is. Mm-hmm. Like you don't know what zombies are. Like what universe is this movie set in?
Yeah.
But this kind of feels like, well, they kind of know what they are, and they're pushing past that because this is their child or this is their friend or a partner or a parent or whatever. It's a loved one. Yeah. So you're pushing past, like, I know this is maybe a quote unquote monster. I'm still going to stay here and deal with this. Yeah. And it's a very different take on it.
I think maybe you and Dave are the only ones I would recommend that movie to. Really? Yeah, because I think I recognize, I like it, mm-hmm. but I recognize a lot of other people would not have the patience for it.
So the reason I kind of identify with it or saw something to relate to is because I have kind of gone through that, in the last couple of years. Yeah. And I've talked about in some previous episodes, but there are things in stories and especially in films that if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't gone through either losing someone or dealing with someone with an illness or whatever, it can seem either kind of foreign or like it doesn't really happen like that. But this is a way, like genre films or horror films, to explore that stuff, but remove it a little bit so it's not so hard to take.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's where I really kind of, I don't know, I latched onto it at some point. You know, there's, because what do we follow in this film? We follow like 3 different storylines?
Yeah, there's the woman with her son.
Yes.
And she also lives with her father, I think. And then the older woman and her partner. And I can't remember the third story. I know there's 3 stories, though.
Okay.
I think there's 3 stories, or maybe not.
Well, the one that really kind of got me was the one with the woman and her son. And it kind of feels like the movie hangs on that one most of the time.
Yes.
But we do get a look at all of these characters and dealing with their own situations. And that one, I mean, the lengths that the mother in this film, she goes to keep her son with her, even though he is a zombie at some point. It's or even, you know, the point when she kind of like starts to check out and like, maybe this is not, you know, that's the way I read it. Like when she goes into the water.
Yes.
And
yeah,
you know, those are all things that will go through your head or you will encounter. And the couple of moments in the film where you really get a sense like, oh yeah, these are zombies. Like when the 2 older women and the one of them kind of like bites or like grabs. Oh, there's the rabbit too. The mother with the rabbit. Is that
the third story?
Yeah, that's the third story.
It's a family.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
The teenage girl, the little boy, and the mother is the zombie.
Yeah.
And they're showing her the rabbit.
Because she was in the hospital, and I think she was about to pass, and then just didn't.
Yeah.
And okay, yeah. Yeah, that was freaky.
Yeah. When those moments happen, and you're like, oh, okay, there is a real threat here.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just somber and sadness. Like, there is a potential for some danger.
I think that the main character, she sees it in others.
Yeah.
Which is why she goes to the water.
Right. So my takeaway was like, this was a really interesting find. And it's one of those that I like when I see something like this, just because it's so different.
It's different from the George Romero films.
It's different and it's thoughtful. It's meaningful. It's not like, oh, we're just going to change the rules just because. It's like, no, but we do have a specific kind of angle and a thing that we want to talk about. So,
well, the guy who wrote it, he's, I believe, a Norwegian author. Also wrote Let the Right One In.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that.
He did that vampire film, which went on to be a classic in its own. They had made a remake of that one.
Right. But that also kind of does its own thing. It's vampires,
but
it's
take
about
on vampire.
So yeah, I liked it, man. It was a good pick. It was a good find. It's not one for somebody who's looking for anything intense.
Yeah.
Or like true, I guess, horror films. It's a very different kind of pace. But so then after that, One Cut of the Undead, or One Cut of the Dead, sorry. That was one that I saw because I was just looking for something else that's in the zombie genre, but different speed. And the fact that it also lays in this idea of filmmakers or filmmaking, it's just an interest to me, right? Of like that process and how that works.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm curious your thoughts on it, but for me, the immediate thing was like, oh, we're watching a film within a film within a film.
Yep.
It's like some Inception going on there. There's like layers of what exactly are we seeing? Well, I could say first, I mean, it's a Japanese film, and I think it's from it was like within the last 10 years. So it's pretty recent, pretty contemporary. And it is essentially about a film crew who is making a short film, not a short film, an episode of TV.
Yeah.
But it's all live and it's all one take.
Yep.
Right? But that's not how we're introduced to it. Like,
right. We're introduced to the live television show first.
Right.
Without realizing that's what it is.
That's right.
And it's all done in one take.
Yeah.
I think I read it took them 6 times to do that and get it right. Because at some point I was kind of like, I don't think they've cut the camera yet. And there's like some weird stuff that happens that it's just kind of moving along at a certain speed. I don't have time to kind of digest what I just saw, because then it goes to the next thing. And it's a 32-minute long take. And then we pan up with the camera and credits are rolling. I'm like, whoa, what just happened? Like, this movie's longer than this. And then it cuts to 1 month ago.
That was so the very first like shot or scene is, we're following a director talking to an actress, right? Like they're having dialogue because she's not getting her lines right. She's not giving a performance. And so the director's kind of laying into her.
He wants to see that fear.
And so it kind of seems like, oh, this is the film within the film, right? Because we see like the attack, and then that doesn't really work out. So the director steps in front of the camera and starts talking to the actress.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, all right, that's really sudden. Like we're just backing out of one of these films into the film around it. But as that goes on, we see like, oh, this is actually a supposed film crew, and they start getting attacked by real zombies.
Yeah.
And this is where we go into the one take, just long, uncut scenario. But the whole time I'm looking at it, I'm like, this doesn't look that good. Like it looks kind of rough. And there are moments that are explained later. There are moments in the first 30 minutes where you're like, wait, what is happening? Like this, why are we holding right here for so long?
Yeah. Yep.
And so just on that ground, like that first 30 minutes, it's more of like a technical showcase, I think, because the fact that they do pull that off. And I think it's designed to look somewhat amateurish. But when you see the rest of the film and how they get to that point, like with the setup for doing this live TV show, and then you see all of the behind the scenes, right? Like you see once it all gets set in motion, and you start to see everything that's happening off camera and just outside of the frame. And that's where I was like, oh, okay. So they didn't only have to do the first 30 minutes and everything that took to make that happen, the choreography of it and all that. They actually made the film outside of that and showed us everything that it took to do that. And I mean, there's even more to the film, but did you stay and watch the credits?
Yeah. You mean at the end?
Yeah.
It was almost like documentary-like.
Where they're showing the actual film crew making the film,
yes.
making the film.
Yeah. Yeah, when I saw that, I was kind of like, well, this wasn't anything we saw, and now everybody looks calm.
Uh-huh.
So this is them, what you said. Like they're
Yeah.
So it had layers to it for sure.
Yeah.
Because the first 30 minutes, it's a horror film.
Right.
The second part of the film, it's a comedy.
Yeah, it's kind of just a weird, dark comedy.
Yeah. And then the third part is still a comedy with dramatic elements because him and his daughter have connected by the end, which I found an appreciation for that.
Yeah.
I was getting upset that that it wasn't actually a horror film. At one point, I was like, "Wait, hold on! Did they just switch the genre on me?" And what am I watching now? And so the second part of the planning of it wasn't as strong for me.
Yeah.
But then when they were showing them shooting the film live, at first I again was almost kind of like, I'm rewatching all this now. But then when you're kind of watching how they made this stuff happen, I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. Mm-hmm. You know, getting the drunk guy.
That's right.
He's passed out and then just like putting makeup on him, even though he's just like knocked out.
Yeah.
The lady who gets up with the axe, I was like, wait, because when I first saw it, she goes, "What's that?" Or and then she's goes back down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the hell was that?
Exactly.
And then there's an explanation later. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. That's what I just found so fascinating. And there was a point where I thought the same thing. I'm like, okay, when does the real actual zombie horror element come in?
Yeah.
Because they like kind of head fake you at the beginning, where it's like you're watching the film crew, quote unquote, and then zombies start attacking.
Yep.
And then you're thinking, okay, but then you realize, oh, that was all made up. And then you see the real film crew doing that film, and you think, okay, now when do the zombies come in? But they don't.
Yeah, they're gone.
Yeah. Because even like the drunk guy, I'm like, okay, is it now he's going to really turn into a zombie now? But it's just playing with that, like the reality of the situation and then the artifice of it. And that's the thing I took away from it, is the commitment to the bit of like, it's about making a film.
Yep.
Whether it's the film in the film or the film in the film in the film. Because when you see like the one girl where she has to take over the camera because the director or the cameraman drops it.
That's right. Yeah.
And so she has to take over, and she's running and she has her own ideas for how to shoot it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you got to do like rack zoom and all this, and then she falls. But someone is recording that happening, right? So
yeah.
So it's just those layers of not only the story in the story, but the creative process of it, those pieces that have to work. And I mean, you know, like being on a set or like trying to make something, it can be already kind of stressful as it is. But then for me to think, oh, it's supposed to be all in one take and it's all live, so there's no redos.
Yeah. And
just to see how they have to improvise and pivot in the moment.
Yeah, it changed. Even though it changed genres, I found myself in that third act kind of like stressed with them. Like, man, how are they going to do this? I go, I mean, I know they do it because I saw it in the first act. But now I'm curious to see because, you know, when they were talking about, well, no, we can't do the crane anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And then saw them all
the pyramid.
Yeah. I was like, oh, that's cool. You know?
Yeah. But then you see how they actually did it in the credits. You're like, oh, they didn't even actually do it that way.
Yeah.
But it feels like, of course, that's the only way you would get it done now.
Right.
And so to me, it was more of a real technical showcase on not only filmmaking, but the inventiveness that goes into filmmaking.
Yeah.
And, you know, how you just have to be dedicated to it, whether it's the real filmmakers or the acting filmmakers. You know, they're committed to making this film, telling this story. Yeah. I did like that it did kind of work in some deeper meanings here and there. I mean, the mom even kind of, you know, getting some of her issues out, some of her stresses out, like the thing with the axe and everything, and the father and daughter. And so I was like, well, okay, it's trying to explore something. But yeah, we do kind of steer away from all of the zombie undead elements at some point.
Yeah, you're watching a comedy dramedy.
Yeah, it is. It's fascinating that way. I don't know if we can really lob it in here with all of these zombie movies.
I mean, I think it earned its way in.
Yeah.
Because it found another way to show a zombie film.
That's true.
I guess, you know. And from what I read, it became very successful on its own. They're already going to do a remake.
Oh, really?
A French remake, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing to me. It like we were saying earlier, if you can find a way to, you know, find a new angle on this genre or just a type of filmmaking, like the uncut one take thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard enough to do, and of course you have to imagine there's probably some magic in there. There's a little bit of stitching of some things, but the premise is there, and it's pretty seamless. And then to think, well, that's just all like the play inside the play.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I thought it was fun. It was more fun than I thought.
Yes, I stayed entertained.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I did. That's a good point. I did kind of the zombie thing started to wear thin on me the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I was like, this doesn't look that great. I'm like, what did I sign us up for? And because I really thought, oh, it's going to be just like an hour and a half of this somehow. But then when we do that cut, or when we get to the end of it, and then we like see like, oh, this is like, you can tell it's shot with like nice cameras and good lighting and all that.
Yeah.
Then it kind of reminds you like, okay, no, that's the thing. That's the thing I look for sometimes is like, do I get a sense like this filmmaker knows what they're doing? Like I can kind of trust like they're going to get us there. They're going to land the plane somehow. And sometimes you have films where it's like, from the first jump, it's like, I don't know. I don't know how this is going to shake out.
Yeah.
But
I feel overall, I think I felt a bigger appreciation for filmmaking.
Yeah.
You know, again, just kind of what it takes to make a film, what it takes when, you know, things aren't going as planned and you got to go to a plan B or a plan you never even figured out because you just like, okay, we're going to try this and see if it works. And because, you're stressed in the beginning because of zombies, and then you're stressed, well, you're kind of lulled in the middle because you're getting to know everybody now. And then as they're making it, you're stressed because you things are falling apart.
Yeah.
But they're also playing out as you saw them.
Yeah, so it's like, you know, it works.
Yeah, but I'm fascinated to see how it will work. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. Because I thought I was going to watch where at some point it still became like a murder. And I was like, oh, it's all a film. Okay. I was like, that's pretty cool still.
That's what, when the mom grabs the axe, I really thought, oh, okay, here's where the turn comes.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's still kind of played for laughs or for a dramatic purpose, but it's not, we're not going across that line, you know? It was an interesting find. Like I said, I just kind of pulled that one out of left field.
Yeah.
I thought it might be a shot in the dark. The thing that occurred to me watching all these films, and it's kind of looking at it like kind of zooming out, is everything that you've seen since The Walking Dead and the let's say the newer wave of zombie titles or stories. Like, I always kind of ask myself, well, where else can you go with this? Because it does seem like any kind of monsters or creatures or whatever, it's like you're going to kind of hit a wall at some point, right?
Yeah.
But these last two films, I feel like, oh, no, there's still room in here somewhere.
Yeah. Looking forward to the next variation of it.
Yeah.
So whenever it comes, because I feel like we're kind of in a holding pattern right now with some of the same zombies.
It does feel that way, right? Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I'm like, other than some films like this, but you know, it's interesting. These films are not American, right? So
yeah,
maybe that's part of it, is someone finding a new take on it, you know? Because you think of even like I mentioned before, 28 Days Later or Shaun of the Dead, you know, films that are from another country, from a different perspective, maybe.
Train to Busan.
That's right.
Yeah.
That really show us a new side of something that we kind of already know, like in and out, you know. There are plenty of other genres, and I know this is October Halloween season and all that, but any genre, any zombie sort of selections that you've seen for like the festival or like the event coming up?
No, we have mainly like vampires, ghosts.
That's something that, you know, maybe it's relevant to these films, but that's something that has occurred to me, is like there's kind of a different perspective on death, like especially like with Latin cultures or I don't know if it's necessarily just Mexican culture, but it does seem like it's approached and it's viewed differently, right? It's not necessarily as something scary.
Yeah. You'll have a lot of films come out of Mexico or South America dealing with death, but not necessarily in the horror genre. I just saw one recently called before the buzzards arrive.
Okay.
It's from Mexico, and it's a surreal film about a husband and wife. They live in this cabin, but at times the husband goes and hangs out with a friend, she's female, and they go on these fishing expeditions. But they're in a boat in the water that they go inside houses. And at first you think that they're going inside flooded houses, but people live there. And you never see the water. So they're in some kind of like in-between world. Okay. And they're collecting things from... I know I'm talking about a whole other movie now, but
no,
this is the take on like... I wanted to show it for this year, but I had already got the... So I'm thinking maybe for the festival next year or Cine de Muertos next year. But that's their exploration of death.
So it's maybe more mystical, more kind
magical realism.
Yeah, I feel like I see that a lot more.
Yes.
Where it's not anything to be frightened by or to be disturbed by, but it's something to, I don't know, be mindful of or to even celebrate in a way.
Yeah, even if you think of like big names like Alejandro González Iñárritu, the film he made Beautiful and Bardo both deal with death and the afterlife,
right,
or the in-between, or a reflection of your life, so to speak. There's no fear or scariness. I mean, there's fear if you're kind of afraid of death.
Sure.
But for him, it's his exploration of his perception of death.
Bardo is really good.
Yes, absolutely.
So anyway, so what will we say is the one to pass on? Is it going to be the Day of the Dead remake?
Yes.
Okay.
Immediately.
Even the original Day of the Dead, I could kind of do without.
Yeah. I agree with that.
And, but that's not to say, because that's a George A. Romero film, right? He wrote and directed that, as with the previous two and the three others I mentioned. And so that's one other thing I wanted to hit on real quick, because I came away from all of these films, and especially the documentary, like, is George A. Romero at this point, maybe it's a hot take, but is he like one of the most influential Latino filmmakers? I mean, he basically invented a genre that has lasted. And then they make a point in the documentary. It's not based on any literary work or previous work, like Dracula.
I mean, he didn't even call them zombies. He referred to them as ghouls.
Right.
It wasn't until I think others picked up
was the undead, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Or no, they are called ghouls in the film. Yeah.
In the script and even in that documentary, he says I called them ghouls.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I think ghouls eat dead bodies, but in this story they were eating people, and it wasn't until later that I guess it got coined zombie, and he ran with it. So the way I see it is, very influential. The same way, Wes Craven was to horror films, like the original Nightmare on Elm Street, the original Halloween film.
John Carpenter,
It's created these franchises that may or may not hold up.
Yeah.
Because there's only so much you can do with a story like that.
But that's the difference I draw, though, is like, Nightmare on Elm Street, it's kind of based on a certain character or type of situation, right?
Right.
So Nightmare on Elm Street without Freddy Krueger, is it really Nightmare on Elm Street? Or like Halloween without Michael Myers?
Yeah.
But like zombie films, there's so many different takes on it. I mean, dozens or hundreds at this point of films over the years and TV shows and all that. And even, look, the TV show is based on a comic, right? So Robert Kirkman with the original, graphic novels, The Walking Dead. So that's like a whole other thing that, and George A. Romero had nothing to do with any of those.
No, but he did say he was inspired by Richard Matheson's I Am Legend.
That's right, yeah.
And so I think, I never read the book, And there was an original film
It's not great.
to that. I never saw
The
that.
Omega
but
Man.
Yeah.
It's very 70s or
Yeah.
late 60s, I guess. Yeah.
So, but I remember the Will Smith one,
Yeah.
which I liked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a cross between, I guess, zombies and vampires. Even the one cut of the Dead, that director was inspired by a play he saw called Ghost in the Box.
Okay.
And I was trying to find information on what that play was about, but I couldn't find it. But whatever happened, the guy who wrote Ghost in the Box ended up successfully suing him and getting his name on the credits. All I found was that it was the references to it when they would talk about the film. They said he was inspired after he saw this play. And I was like, inspired, or did he copy it?
Yank
Like,
that, yeah. Wow.
So,
Well, and that's what I say. Like it makes me think of like a filmmaker to make a film that, as it's shown in the documentary, is so kind of scrappy and pieced together and just willed into existence, and then to go on and have such an effect across like the landscape of film and even television and books and all that. Because put it this way, if you take that film out of the equation, the original Night of the Living Dead. Does somebody else make that film at some point?
I think he definitely put his stamp on the genre, on the film community.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if it hurt or helped that they never got the trademark right, and it went into the public domain.
Yeah.
So everybody got to make their own variations of it. Everybody got to make money off of it, screening it, without having to give them royalties. That changed the game for, Luckily, he still went on to have a successful career, but that was interesting.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder if that was out of necessity of like, well, I get nothing off of my original first film. Let me kind of get more bites at the apple and get something out of it.
Because he held off from doing a sequel, from what I read, because he didn't want to be typecast like a horror director. And it's funny because that's mainly what we know him for now.
But that's the thing, right?
And I think he later embraced it.
Yeah.
Because, his name is held in high regard in the zombie and horror community.
Yeah, for whatever, quality of some of the films,
Yeah.
Or some of the stories in the films. I don't know. I feel like, wow, you can really trace it all back to this film and this filmmaker and his idea for it, So anyway, that's our, I guess, current exploration of zombies and the undead and the walking dead and the living dead. What else are we calling them these days? The ghouls. That's all we've got for now, I think, huh? We've talked about enough for these.
I think so.
Again, let everybody know where they can find what's going on with the festival, you guys.
We're going to have our 9th annual Houston Latino Film Festival in March of 2025. After we do our Cine de Muertos this coming up next week, we'll probably start making some announcements for the upcoming 9th annual. And you can find more information on our Facebook, Instagram, and HoustonLatinoFilmFestival.org.
All right. Sounds good. Pedro, it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too,
Good to talk about some films. We're going to do this again, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So take it easy. Go to filmstreak.com. You can find other episodes there. You can sign up to get these by email. I have a list. I've got a list on IMDb of all of these films. 500.
Really?
At this point, with this episode, we're probably up to like 530 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a trip to look back now and be like, wow, I really have watched all these films in just the last couple of years now.
Yeah.
So that's there if you want to see where these are streaming, because you can do that on IMDb. You can, I don't know if do people really leave reviews on IMDb still? Or rate them? I rate them for myself.
Yeah.
But
I've heard people using Letterboxd now.
Letterboxd seems to be a thing.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a lot of film nerds there. Even though I probably should be considered a part of that.
I figured you were on there.
I am, but I don't.
You like what you like? IMDb? I'm not on either. I'm trying to look for somewhere where I can start listing films I've seen, because I don't, when I'm talking with you or talking to another friend, he writes down all the movies he watches, and I realize I don't keep a list, and I need to.
So I started doing it with IMDb because it's just been around longer.
Yeah.
Since, I don't know, like the early 2000s or somewhere in there. And so that's the reason I kind of go back to it. It is kind of like my Wikipedia for films, of like the cast or the directors or sequels and all that stuff. And so, yeah, I just use it to kind of keep track of everything I watch. Letterboxd, I know some people that use it, and I know it's got more of a community vibe to it, right? Because it's kind of like a film social network in a way. I know a lot of filmmakers are on there, like they have accounts, and you can, check out their favorite films or whatever. But I don't have a history there really, so I don't. Yeah. Anyway, IMDb, check that out. Or go to filmstrick.com. You can find the list there. And otherwise, we still got some daylight, so I'm going to go watch something there.
Cool.